Alright, so we're downtown today and we're going to take some pictures. And I'd watched a video just a little while ago in regards to if you need a zoom lens or not, because you could just crop. So I think we're going to test that theory. I think it's wrong. So I think you do need a zoom lens because of the way that the depth of field will work and the compression works when you are zoomed. So we're going to take some shots today in regards to, well, using two lenses and see what they look like at the similar distances and see if you do need a zoom versus just cropping. All right, let's go do that. We're just walking around Ottawa and I'm going to try to shoot some stuff with both a 17 to 50, so at both extremes, and a 70 to 200. So let's go do that now, shall we?
Let's take a trip across the sea, somewhere far away, and just be free. A place times don't go. We can call it our paradise, just you and I. Now wouldn't that be nice? Oh, it's our paradise, staying up all night, just you and I, under the moonlight, our feet in the sand, your hand, my hand, fall asleep till the waves crash in, wake up and do it again.
Okay, so just so you guys know, we are shooting these photos always at the same distance. So we're shooting at different focal lengths. So I'll shoot one at a 70mm, then at a 200, but I physically don't move from the subject, because if I did, then that would affect how depth of field works. So we're shooting with both a 17 to 50 2.8, which will be 2.8 at both focal lengths, and a 70 to 200 f4, so an f4 at both focal lengths. We're gonna keep walking around here and see what else we can see that's kind of cool. All right, let's go.
I want to remember this moment for life, yeah. That look you gave me was staring in my eyes, and I'm never gonna let this go. Dancing real fast and slow, holding your waist real close. It's our paradise, let's go.
We're continuing our walk, and there's, I don't know if you can see them, there's Mary and Harley back there. Yep. Hello. And hello. So we've done Parliament, and it's pretty cool because we're helping Harley learn some of her photography, so she's taking some pictures today too. There's Parliament Hill back there, and we're gonna switch to the 70 to 200 to get some final shots, and then head back to the car. All right. Every time I see you, say we should live it, it's vision we see it. Riding Bentleys, rolling right through the previous, believing it was meant to be. Together chasing paradise, making you for life, never in the jam, please. Yes, please, sign me up. Sunny's at the door, I tell them line it up. All right, my friends, we're back, and I've got some photos. I've looked at them because I think that's important, and I want to go over a few things in regards to why I did this. Again, one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to do this little test was for you guys to understand some of the differences in how a zoom works and why you would possibly want a zoom lens versus just cropping. One of the things first, and I've picked a few photos that I've taken at both a zoom focal length. So that focal length is your zoom. So you know when you have a lens, your kit lens for instance, that says 18 to 55. Well, that's an 18mm focal length, as well as all the way to a 55mm focal length. So that's basically how light is transferring through, which gives you things like depth of field and information like that. If you want to learn more about that, which I do recommend, I'm not going to do it in this video, but there are some really good videos on YouTube, which is where you're probably watching this, that go through how depth of field works. And three things that really are used in regards to how depth of field, which I'll talk about in a bit. But the first one is just zoom versus crop in general and resolution of your camera. If you start with, let's say, a older camera or a smartphone or even a higher end SLR, if you look at how your camera is, and I'll use my camera for instance, and it's a Canon EOS M50, it's a 24 megapixel camera. So when I get a shot that's what I want, so zoomed in, I'm getting all that megapixels. I'm getting all 24 million pixels on the screen giving me all that resolution. So that allows me to print pictures really big. It allows me to see it in as much detail as I can. And it does allow me to have some crop room, which is good. You know, it all depends really on what you're going to use this photo for. So if you're just going to throw it up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, then that may not be as big a concern, the resolution, because it may only be displayed on a smartphone. But you have to remember, even smartphones, and for me, I watch a lot of content actually on my television, and my television is 4K. So that 4K television, if you look at resolution wise, it's pushing about 12 megapixels. So number one is, how do you get that megapixel? And it's basically multiplication of your pixels horizontal to vertical. So my camera shoots 6,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels. So 6,000 times 4,000 is 24 million, which is 24 megapixels. I'm going to show you these two photos here. So this is a photo that I took of my daughter when we were out doing this. This photo here, right here, versus this photo here. And my hope is that you guys can see a difference between these two. I'm going to bring up just an information panel here. So if you look over here on the side, you'll see that this was shot with the Canon 70-200 f4, ISO 200 at 200 millimeters at f4. That's the big ones that I want, because they have to be the same to realize this. So f4, 200 millimeters, 6,000 by 4,000. So I'm getting the full 24 megapixels. Now I'm going to go back to the previous one. And this one I have taken a wide shot and cropped it in to make it look like this shot. So we go back here, 70-200 at 70. So I'm at full wide for that camera. And you'll actually notice two things. Number one is my foreground and background are very similar. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Next one here is the image looks soft, right? There doesn't look like really there's anything in this photo that is really sharp. And the reason for that is if you look and do a multiplication of these two numbers, so let's say we'll round it up to about 2,500 to 15-ish hundred, we're probably only getting somewhere in around 4 megapixels. 4. That's it. 4 megapixels. That's not a lot. So even at 4 megapixels, it's underneath what I would need to display at full res on a 4K television. This is probably lower than some smartphones are and tablets. Having this photo, it's not going to look great. Now I cropped it in to match that, but that's some of the arguments, is that you can just crop in with that kind of resolution, and that's starting with a 24 megapixel camera. If I was shooting a smartphone that only started with 12, if I were to crop in all that way, I may be down to less than 1 megapixel. So that's not good. Now the other one here, and I'm just going to come out of here, is I'll go to another photo here, and I'll do this one with, again, my wife and daughter. So this here is that photo, and this was shot with a 17-50, so I'm a little closer, but the same premise here. See, 17-50, this one's at 17 millimeters at f2.8. And if you zoom in on this photo, and I did a crop already, so that's this one. Same deal here, the photo looks a little softer. So there's a 17 millimeter. I'm down now to, again, between 3 and 4 megapixels, which is why it's soft. But here's the other one, is if you look at the background here versus the foreground, okay, there is some separation, and that's because I'm fairly close with that lens, because it's only a 50 mil. Now, if we come out and actually look at it at full, so no crop, at a 50, which is this one, you'll see it here, 50 millimeter. First off, look how much sharper it looks. Of course it looks sharper. This is at a full 24 megapixels, so it's got way more resolution to play with. Second is, look at that separation between the foreground and the background. There is a shallow depth of field. Now I'm standing not too far, and of course in a scenario like this, could I walk closer to them to get this shot? Yeah, most definitely I probably could have walked closer. But you have to remember, with a zoom, the purpose of a zoom is being able to get shots that you may not be able to get to. That's where a zoom really plays this role. I'll show you another one here. See if I can get here. So back to my 200, because that one's really where you're looking at the zoom range. Here is the 200 mil at full wide. So you can see it up here, right? 6,000 by 4,000, full resolution at 70 millimeters at f4. Now we're going to crop that in. So again, that separation between the foreground and background, 70 millimeter, isn't there. The image seems soft. The depth of field is much bigger now because of the fact that I'm at a wider lens, right? Or a wider focal length of my lens, which again is one of the premises of how depth of field works. And we'll go to the shot with the zoom. You can definitely see that difference between how sharp this is. And none of these photos have been touched. This is raw out of the camera. Okay, I say raw. This is untouched out of the camera because these are shot in JPEG. But there's that nice, for one, separation, depth of field kicking in, and again, resolution. So is having a zoom lens important? Yeah, without question. One of the biggest things that you will hear from a lot of photographers, especially photographers that are shooting with SLRs or mirrorless or 4/3 or full frames or whatever they're shooting with, is that you need to really invest in your camera's lenses. Because when you buy a lens, you will have that lens possibly for a long time. I've had lenses, or have lenses, that I've had from cameras that I no longer have anymore, because the fact is they're interchangeable to a lot of the systems that come out later. Even, and I'll talk about Canon right now, I'm shooting on a Canon EOS M50, which is one of their mirrorless cameras, and I just use an adapter to put my old EF lenses on it. Works like a charm. Don't have to reinvest in those lenses. So that's a big one. The only other thing I just wanted to give you some information in regards to depth of field, if you want to, as a little added bonus, is that depth of field really relies on three main things. So number one is your focal length. That plays a big part in depth of field. So your focal length. So like we saw, 70 versus 200. 200 had a shallower depth of field than the 70 did, if they're shot at the same aperture. So aperture plays a big role. And the aperture, of course, is how big that the iris in your camera opens. So the bigger it opens, the shallower the depth of field, which is why, let's say a 1.4 versus a f4, the 1.4 at the same distance would have a shallower depth of field. Last one is physical distance to the subject. So the closer you get, the shallower your depth of field is. And again, what I want you guys to do, if you want more information about this, is there are some really good videos out there that explain how depth of field works. I do encourage you guys to go look at them, because it's good knowledge to realize that if you want shallower and you have lens X and you can't get closer, what other settings on your camera can you adjust to change that? All good information to know. I'm going to leave you guys there. So do I think a zoom lens is important? Yeah, without question. Should you invest in your lenses? Yeah, it's something that I'm doing slowly over time, because they are a little pricey. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope it was useful. Like, comment, share, and subscribe as per the norm. Hit the little bell. Get notified, because it's cool. And we'll talk to you later, my friends. Have a good one. Later.